We are at the trailhead, and this is the kiosk you see right here of the Pony Express. And I'm going to try to go through it real briefly before we hike. Sir Richard Burton, a noted British or English explorer, came through here in about 1860 in October and described the station as a wretched place, half built and wholly unroofed, and the four boys, an exceedingly rough set, ate standing. Neither paper nor pencil was known amongst them. Our animals found good water in a rivulet from neighboring hills, which was Cold Springs, the creek, Cold Springs Creek, while the humans, and Rock Creek, that's nearby, but the humans, observing that a beef had been freshly killed, supped upon an excellent steak. We slept under a haystack, heard the howling of wolves, which are said to be larger than the hills than elsewhere. So the wolves here were pretty decent sized. One of the best preserved Pony Express stations is Cold Springs in Nevada, 2 miles east of here by trail. The 1860 structure was built of large native rocks and mud. It's a large station measuring 160 feet by 51 feet. The walls are 4 to 6 feet high, 3 feet thick. There are 4 distinct rooms: a storage area, barn, corral, and living quarters. It's interesting to note that the horse corral is located next to the living quarters. This was done primarily as a safety measure to guard the valuable animals, but also to take full advantage of their body heat during the cold Nevada winters. The only other source of heat was from a small fireplace. Gun ports along the walls can still be seen. Day versus seconds. While Pony Express riders like Bob Haslam were setting speed records, another group of hardy Westerners was stringing a thin wire that would prove fatal for the future of the pony and put an end to the West's relative isolation from the rest of the nation. Nevada was one of the most isolated areas. The wire was a transcontinental telegraph. When completed in 1861, it met the need for communication between the East and the West that had created the Pony Express. The Pony Express and its heroic riders with skill, luck, and determination could carry messages 2,000 miles away in only 10 days, but it couldn't compete with the talking wire that could transmit the same message in 10 seconds flat. The Pony Express, and with it a colorful era of wild Western history, was at its end, and the remains of the transcontinental telegraph station can be seen across from here, which was replaced by telecommunication. Robert Haslam, known as Pony Bob, was the best-known Pony Express rider in Nevada. Cold Springs Station played a major role in one of Pony Bob's most exciting adventures. 380-mile round-trip ride in 36 hours. Billed as one of the longest, fastest runs in Pony Express history. In 1860, when Bob was 19 and Western Nevada was in the middle of the Pyramid Lake Indian War, Pony Bob's regular run was from Friday Station in the Sears to Buckland Station, which is present-day Lahontan Reservoir. We've been there. We've done the fort that's located there. And one of the overland stations, or actually is an old Pony Express, but old Buckland is like a general store, a place to water your horses. He first ran into trouble at Reed's Change Station. The citizens of militia had confiscated all animals for war, and Bob was forced to ride into Bucklands on a nearly exhausted horse. At Bucklands, he was to have been relieved by a rider named Johnson Richardson, but because of the Indian trouble, Richardson refused to ride. It was a scary time. There was a lot of raids and tensions. The station master, W.C. Marley, promised Bob a $50 bonus if he'd ride to the next station, so Bob went through 3 more relief stations: a Smith Creek Station, a distance of 190 miles. After a short sleep, Bob turned and retraced his route. First stop was Cold Springs. When I arrived at Cold Springs, he says, to my horror, I found the station had been attacked by Indians, the keeper killed, and all the horses taken away. I decided in a moment what course to pursue. I would go on. At the next station, he told the station master of the danger and advised him to go to the next station. Bob says he took my advice, and so probably it saved his life for the following morning as Smith Creek was attacked. Wow. The rest of the trip was tiring for Pony Bob, but reasonably uneventful. He traveled 380 miles within a few hours of scheduled time and was surrounded by perils at every hand. This is the Lonely Vigil. When you think of the Pony Express, the image of a heroic rider, hat blown back in the wind, his horse full gallop comes to mind. But have you ever thought about the men who erected the Pony Express stations? These station masters may have had the lack of glamour of the pony riders, but actually they endured more hardships and danger than the riders. They would have to collect the rocks, mortar them up, and build these sites in dangerous terrain. In Nevada, the basic criteria for selecting a station site was proximity to water, so the stations were not placed too far out of the way where it would be inconvenient or dangerous. You know, because if you went looking for water, you could be attacked by Indians and killed. The station masters were in constant danger of Indian attacks. Several were killed by Indians, except for the home stations where riders exchanged places. The station masters had little time to talk to the riders. Their job was to have a fresh horse ready for the next rider. In many stations, it was a lonely life, with the station masters far from settlements, fearful Indian attacks, always waiting for the next rider. So you'd sit at a station, the next rider would come through, you'd get on and hop. But anyways, this goes into the history, which is my last video until we get to the station. Competing with time, distance, harsh climate, and hostile Indians, the Pony Express carried important communications. Like I said, 2,000 miles in 10 days. They called it the Pony. They didn't really call it the Pony Express. But it was an example of American courage, endurance, and determination in westward expansion of the Wild West and our nation. Speeding mail and news across the country, the Pony was a vital life of the nation for at least 2 to 3 years. And it played an important role in preserving our nation by keeping California in the Union in the outbreak of the Civil War. This was not Civil War territory. Completion of transcontinental telegraph line put an end to the Pony Express, I believe, in 1861 to about 1863. It was met by the Talking Wire. Despite its high prices, up to $5 an ounce at its peak, the Pony Express was a losing enterprise from the beginning. Receipts were often high, but expenses were enormous. In spite of the contributions to the Union and westward expansion, the Pony never received any financial assistance from the government. Yet its founders, W.H. Russell, Alexander Major, and William Waddell, felt the need was important. The Pony Express operated in the red until it went out of business in October 28th of 1861. It's pardon me, but it's from April 1860 to October 1861. So you're looking at a little over a year that it ran. I made a mistake earlier in my videos. I at least got it down. I thought it was at 63, but I guess it depends on who you ask, what plaque you read, and because some of them do say 1863 on some historical sites. I wish people would get it accurate, because I tend to remember those things, and then I come to these sites and find out that's not true. Pony Express relay stations were 10 to 35 miles apart. Along each route had 2 to 4 men, extra horses. About 500 of the hardiest Western horses were brought here. They were worth $200 each. There was about 80 riders, and they were recruited from the most daring, determined, and toughest, wiry young fellows in the West. Lightly equipped and armed with a Navy Colt revolver, and each man rode at least 35 miles in one direction, changing horses at 3 relay stations along the way. You're going to get to see one today. Over his saddle, the rider would carry a mochila, a leather cover, with 4 mail pouches of letters. He wasted no time at the relay stations. He'd only stop for water and to transfer the precious mochila into the next waiting horse. Day and night, good weather, bad weather, winter weather, snow, rain, heat of summer in the desert, the riders covered 10 to 15 miles an hour on their routes. Surprisingly, over 18 months, the Pony operated. Only 1 mail pouch was lost, and service was only held up for 1 month during the Indian Wars, which we've also covered. Historic sites along the Pony Express route have been interpreted for enjoyment as part of the nation's bicentennial observance of the American Revolution. And so I bring you guys this trail. This is Lord Rick. Into the wilderness we go. A lot of history here. Very fascinating. Peace.